Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical. This is the weekly show that Tony Ortega get together, and we go over the week's events in the world of Scientology as covered on Tony's Substack. Tony, welcome back.
Hey, it's been quite a week, hasn't it?
Ah, oh, just, one little thing. Anyway, yes, it has been quite a week. So let's get to it. We'll start with Clearwater. There were a couple of stories you gave. I had a couple of perspectives on this, but there was a fairly significant, for us Scientology watchers, fairly significant vote this week. What happened?
Yeah, and I want to thank Mark Bunker. I had gotten a tip that David Miscavige had privately met with these city council members, one individually, and the reason he does that is that if you put two council members together in a room, it becomes an official meeting under Florida state law. So Miscavige wants to give them a message. He doesn't want the public to know about it. He's got to meet them one by one. He did. I got a tip on that. I went to Mark Bunker. He confirmed it. He's got, he's still got his sources in the city. And so then Mark and I were talking about what's going on is that David Miscavige wanted the city council to vote to give Scientology this street, this little one block road, South Garden Avenue. Scientology would pay 1.3 million for it. But the important thing about it is it's right in that apron between the flag building and where they're going to build L. Ron Hubbard Hall. And the reason why Mark Bunker went to the meeting that night and criticized it is that, we've known this L. Ron Hubbard Hall is coming for a long time. And the fact that they want this sort of plaza out in front of it is probably not that big a deal. But, and Mark Bunker's been saying for years, you can't give Miscavige things until he makes the first move in doing something with all of these vacant properties he's sitting on. That's what keeps downtown a ghost town. That's why nobody wants to go down there, is that you're either in front of a Scientology building or an empty building. And it's really because of David Miscavige. So Mark was really critical of the fact that they weren't getting something. I mean, other than the $1.3 million, that's nominal. For Scientology, it's nothing. Remember, Dave was willing to pay $20 million for a similarly sized parcel on the other side of Fort Harrison Hotel, and the city wouldn't give it to him. So it's not the money, it's the fact that he's still sitting on these properties on Cleveland Street and he's not doing anything with it. So Mark went that night. We assumed it was going to be a 4-1 vote. I did watch live the hearing so I could see what the city council members said. And to our surprise, not only was Lena Teixeira against it, so was the mayor. Mayor Bruce Rector was also against it. He said that Scientology was not giving them enough information about what this finished thing was going to look like. And so he voted no. So it's 3-2. But, the guy that was really the most vocal, this Ryan Cotton, he was talking about how, he kept using the word hopefully, Chris. He kept saying, hopefully David Miscavige and Scientology will come through with the things they're saying about. And see, you're just on the wrong side of things when you can't hope that David Miscavige is going to do the right thing. You have to force him to do it. And it's been done, right? People get smart with him, treat him the way he should, and he caves. He has. I'm thinking specifically about like the Laura DiCrescenzo case, where after 8-9 years of litigation, they finally had a trial date, and then just before trial, Laura's attorney moved that Dave should have to be there. So not only was the trial about to start, but Dave was going to have to be in the courtroom, and Dave at that point Dave caved and wrote a check. Very smart on the part of Laura's attorney. So you can, if you treat Miscavige the way he should be, as a bully that needs to be pushed to do the right thing, things can happen. But to be sitting there saying, "Oh, hopefully Scientology comes through with their side of the deal," I mean, what a joke. How many more years? I mean, Scientology surreptitiously moved into Clearwater in 1975, 50 years ago. And they still haven't learned their lesson, the people, the leaders of Clearwater. So I just really appreciate that Mark Bunker went that night. He spoke up at the hearing. After the hearing, he and I did a little video and talked it over. And who knows when this thing's going to be done? We don't know. The city council gave them kind of a deadline that if they don't get it done by 2029, they're going to have to start paying 300,000 a year, which, for David Miscavige, he's only got to get one mid-level whale to turn that over. No big deal. So it may be quite a while yet, or maybe they'll put it up real fast. I really don't know, Chris.
Yeah, hard to say. I'll just say this. People know my attitude about Clearwater is rather, tired resignation at this point. I'm so fed up with the continuing cyclic aspect of Clearwater City Council, just sort of greenlighting Scientology's plans eventually after they wear them down after enough time, or find these, people, these fresh incumbents or whatever, and bring or fresh members. And you'd think, all I want to say is that, I understand that the work of a city council is broad and that it has to encompass all of the city, and that Scientology is one part of a big picture of stuff that city council in Clearwater would have to deal with. I get it. At the same time, this is a church that has declared war on Clearwater, owns what, a third of the downtown properties, is a major real estate investor, let's say, in the downtown area, and so has an outsized influence in this town beyond its the quirky beliefs and human rights violations that it engages in on a daily basis. So it seems to me that there would be no excuse at all for even a new city council member to come into the scene and say things like, hopefully, when it comes to Scientology. I mean, there's just no pass that I can see to give for this. They're just acting foolishly, if not corruptly. And I can tack it up to ignorance. It doesn't have to be corruption. But man, you just shake your head at this, because they just keep wearing these people down on the city council there. And that's why the ever vigilant Mark Bunker is our man, because he just won't give up. He's tenacious. There are eyes in Clearwater. They should all be focused on this kind of stuff. This is stuff to be paying attention to with Scientology, because this is the creeping influence it has as it grows, is doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just needed to comment on that for anybody. If you're not aware of the long history of Scientology in Clearwater, there's probably a Wikipedia page on it. It's extensive, so you can check that out. Let's move on now. This was an interesting one. There was some dots connected between a civil lawsuit that Trump is involved in and some earlier Scientology case.
Yeah, this was kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
The January 6th riot resulted in a lot of different criminal prosecutions, pardons, all kind of stuff.
Yep.
But you can imagine there's still a lot of civil lawsuits involved with that whole incident.
Sure.
And apparently some of them involve President Trump, but also his deputy chief of staff and the guy that's basically run his social media for the last decade, and that's Dan Scavino. And the reason why this came up, there's this nonprofit news organization called Not Us that first reported it, and then Raw Story highlighted the Scientology angle. What's going on is that Dan Scavino's attorney went into court and said, look, there's various evidence in this case that's sealed, and he knows the court wants to release it to the public, but they're arguing you need to keep this stuff with Dan in it sealed, because it might embarrass him. Well, how would it embarrass him? And the attorney says, just because he's working with Trump, and that's enough to harm a person's reputation. Well, it's really ironic for someone to be making that argument when they're literally working in the White House with Donald Trump. So it's just a weird argument to make, but I guess, okay, fine. But what made it interesting for us is that in making the argument that documents that are sealed, which are embarrassing, should not be released, they cited a 1980 Church of Scientology case.
What?
And that's all Nada said. That's all Raw Story said. Well, I know what case they're talking about. They're talking about Snow White. And so I went back and looked up that appeal. It was really interesting, and I had to get my book out because I wrote at length about the whole Snow White case in my book, The Unbreakable Miss Lovely, because it has a lot to do with Paulette Cooper, the subject of my book. So I went back and went through that whole history, and just a real quick version is that, yes, the FBI raided the Church of Scientology on July 8th, 1977, biggest raid in FBI history, and took like 100,000 pages of documents. Right away, Scientology just sicked their best attorneys on the court saying, this is an illegal search. You can't use those documents. And so the courts told the FBI and the Department of Justice, while this is being litigated, you can't say anything about those documents. And so the story just sort of faded from the press. It was a very smart move by Scientology. People kind of forgot about the fact that Scientology had been raided until about a year later, when the Washington Post, they didn't make any documents public, but they said that according to their FBI sources, there's some pretty incredible stuff in here, including this elaborate operation against this woman named Paulette Cooper. This was the first time Paulette's story had really become public, was a Washington Post story in April 1978. And, the Washington Post was just hinting that, look, there's some incredible stuff in these documents, but, they're sealed. Later that year, in 78, is when the first 9 of the Scientology executives were indicted, including Mary Sue Hubbard. There was a 10th and an 11th, but they were in England and had to be extradited. So that took later. But the first 9 were indicted in August 1978. So in 79 was the trial. It wasn't really a trial. It was sort of a pretrial. The judge in that case, Judge Charles Ritchie, went out from D.C. to L.A. just to make it more convenient for all the defendants who were all in L.A. And they fought that summer over whether or not that search was legal and whether the government could use that evidence against these defendants. Once Judge Ritchie ruled that, yes, the raid was legal, the government can use these documents against the defendants, that's when all 9 of them pled guilty. And it's clear that they did that because they were falling on their swords for the church. They did not want a trial to show what was in those documents.
That's right.
So the way that we know the elaborate work in the Snow White operation, Snow White program, was that the FBI, the Department of Justice, then wrote up this detailed memorandum for the sentencing. And that's the document we have that really spells out, and they all had to sign it and plead guilty. Well, so Judge Ritchie sentenced them in December 79. And they got between like 1 and 5 years each. The Department of Justice dropped all the charges except conspiracy. And so Mary Sue Hubbard got like 5 years in prison. She only served 1. That was later. But anyway, December 1979, Judge Ritchie sentences everybody. And then he says, okay, now I'm going to make some of these documents public. And Scientology blew a gasket. They were so pissed off. But the initial appeal failed. And sure enough, January 1980, Judge Ritchie made 23,000 pages. So not the whole haul, but a large percent of the raid evidence public in DC. And Paulette and I talked about this. She and Nan McClain were first in line. They were there with reporters. There were some Freedom Magazine reporters to get inside this room with all these boxes of evidence and a copying machine that was going all the time. And people were getting their stuff. That's when the stories came out, right? That was early 1980. That's when people were reporting like, oh my God, this thing calls itself a church. It's a mafia. It operates, like an intelligence agency. Look at all these operations they're running against people. And that's when 60 Minutes did its show, and the city of Clearwater rose up. People couldn't believe what was in these documents. Well, Scientology kept fighting, and only a month later, they got a hearing at an appellate level to try to get those documents resealed. That's the case that 45 years later, Dan Scavino is citing in order to keep his documents secret. And in that case, the majority decision of the appeals court was, yes, the church is separate from the defendants and has its own private privacy rights, and that these were documents taken out of the church, their property, and that the judge should not have made them public because they really weren't used in the trial. Right, the defendants pleaded guilty before they could be used. So there was but I looked it up, and there was a wonderful dissent from a justice who was not going along with it. He said he was really angry. He's like, Scientology doesn't want privacy. Scientology wants secrecy. There's no separation between the church and these defendants. The defendants were doing this for the church on the orders of the church. So that one judge understood what was going on, but he was outvoted, and the documents were resealed. Now we can still see many of them today because they were made public at that time in January 1980. The Scientology was taking no risks. Not only were they fighting in court with high-priced attorneys to get those documents resealed, but at the same time, I wanted to remind people they were paying a private investigator to dig up dirt on Judge Ritchie. And he found a woman who claimed that she had been paid to have sex with him. Knowing Richard Bass, the private investigator who put this all together, I can tell you it's all bogus.
Yep.
Everything Bass did was bogus, all right? But it was enough to, Judge Ritchie gave up the case, claimed he was having health problems. Basically, Scientology took down a U.S. district judge with their slimy covert operations. At the same time, in appeals court, they were getting treated like, benefit of the doubt. They're a church. Incredible. So, none of that's coming up in Dan Scavino's case, but I wanted to remind people that's how this organization operates. They go into court. Hey, we're a church. We have privacy rights. At the same time, they're trying to destroy a judge. I mean, it's just incredible how this thing operates. And those documents were accurate. This is a mafia that operates under secrecy. That's the real truth.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it is exactly what those documents show. And countless testimonials of people who have come out of the church since that time. This is not ancient history. This is not, that was then and this is now, and we've cleaned up, as they tried to claim in the mid-'80s after they just did a big name change and rebranding of all of this and thought that was going to be sufficient. But, fortunately, most people are onto Scientology's toxicity. But you really got to know, it goes all the way to the core. There's nothing good at the bottom of this. A lot of people are like, there's probably something redeeming. There's probably something good about the auditing or something. I'm telling you, there isn't. This is bad all the way to the bottom.
Yep.
Which is why we follow it so closely. We want folks to fight this stuff. Speaking of San Francisco Church of Scientology, skateboard phenom Aron Kyro. What's the latest and greatest with this guy?
Wow, what a big week he had. We've been writing about him for years, and it was kind of amazing to find out several years ago. We learned that he's kind of a lifer as far as a staff guy in San Francisco. He's now ED.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so that means he spends incredible hours as on staff at the churches at the San Francisco Ideal Org.
Yep.
At the same time, he's a gold meritorious donor who's given $1 million to the IAS. How does a staffer who's making minimum wage, if that, afford a $1 million donation? Well, he's got this completely other life where he runs something called Braille Skateboarding, which is this 6 million subscriber YouTube channel dedicated to teaching beginners how to do their first, jumps and stuff on skateboards. And I guess he had enough of a crew underneath him that he didn't have to be there all the time. But it's been kind of amazing the way he's juggled both until recently. Braille skateboarding has definitely suffered some setbacks, and people were asking, well, maybe it's because Aron's given so much money to the church, or he's, spending so much time. Anyway, that's the kind of backdrop. And also, we know he's been spending a ton of time in Clearwater because Dave wants these teams from various ideal orgs to come to the Flagland base. Dave Dave has to come up with excuses for why the ideal orgs aren't working. And his most recent excuse is, okay, they have staffs, but they don't have the golden age of admin yet, right? So he's making them come to Clearwater, learn L. Ron Hubbard's business administration claptrap, over and over and over. They have to do it like 5 times and get 100% each time. Now they're super trained. Fire them back to their orgs, and now you're going to see the ideal orgs take off. Well, what happened this week was the birthday game and the L. Ron Hubbard birthday event, and that's when they reveal the winners of the birthday game, which is when the orgs all compete with each other to do the most signups, auditing, whatever their statistics are.
Right.
And who came out on the very top? Now, Rod Keller a few years ago showed that it's kind of rigged. The birthday game's kind of rigged for new ideal orgs. And because it's kind of based on, it's not just that you need to bring in a certain amount of business, but it's got to be certain number of times what you've done before. Well, if you're brand new, it's pretty easy to double and triple your business because you had nothing before, right? So that's how Rod showed that
last week. So this week you get two people who come in. Look, we 200%ed our statistics.
Exactly. So Rod was showing it. That's why it's set up so that when an ideal org comes online, has a grand opening, there's a real good chance it's going to win the birthday game the next year because it has a statistical advantage. Yeah. Last year, 4 new ideal orgs were opened: Austin, a second one in Mexico City, Chicago, and Paris. So you would expect that one of those might come out on top. Well, the new Mexico City one almost came out on top, but it was beat by a few points by the San Francisco ideal org. And they're making a big deal about it's because that ideal org team went to Clearwater and got the new golden age of admin. And the photos all feature Aron Kyro, in the center. He's ED Day, I think he is. And now we get a report that not only did San Francisco org win the Class 5 org birthday game, which is the big one of all the classes, that's the big one. Not only did they win that on last week's birthday event in Clearwater, that this week was shown to the other orgs, but that Aron Kyro was asked to give a speech. So, I mean, from skateboarding kid in San Francisco to, becoming ED, becoming gold meritorious, and now he's speaking on stage at a major international Scientology event. Wow, what a week for Aron Kyro. I can't help thinking Dave's grooming him for something.
Well, I don't see anything too unusual in this, to be honest with you. I see a winner of a birthday game on stage. This is not unique that they have the winners flown out there to speak on the stage. So I certainly agree with you fully that this is Aron Kyro's peak moment in Scientology, right? Absolutely, he is like to the stars and beyond. But he's ruining his life right now. I mean, what we're watching is, the beginning of the end for this man in terms of his professional, whatever. I think he's, there's been videos put out about him already about the rise and fall of Aron and Braille skating and this kind of thing. So I'm not going to try to repeat any of that. You all can check those things out. But this is all too typical from what I saw in Scientology over and over and over and over and over, including my own story over the years, which is you get in there, you give more and more and more and more of your life to this thing. That's what he's doing. You give more and more and more. And if you've got something good going on like he did, that slowly becomes less and less of your life and less important, even if it's the thing that's paying the bills. And even if it's the thing that's giving you $1 million to give to the church, they're constantly working on you inside the building to give more of your time, more of your effort, more of your dedication, and even make the ultimate sacrifice by joining staff and ultimate joining the Sea Org. Like they got with some of the Peter Schless, for example. They take a career musician who's written hits and they turn him into a Sea Org member. How do you do that? It's not one talk. It's years of working on that person. And I see that here with him, with the little that I do know about him. And the fact that he's the daytime executive director, so he's running the show Monday through Friday, 9 to 6. Well, that means his entire professional life is now pretty much at the church, because that means nights and weekends would be the only time theoretically he'd have for some other business activity.
Let me double check that. If he's foundation, let me just double check that
Yeah.
because
Either way, it's going to be a strain on him. And I was going to say, either way, he's going to be putting in a lot more time as the executive director than just the business hours of the church he's running. We made more demands as management staff when I was a management staff in Scientology. More demands were made of the executive directors of the orgs than any other Scientologists. Period. End of story. Those EDs are the people who carry Scientology on their backs at,
yeah.
at that level. So, do we know one way or the other?
It's buried on one of my stories. I'll have to look it up. I can't remember off the top of my head. I just know he's one of the two EDs. I couldn't swear it's Day or Foundation, but
Fair enough.
um,
Either way, same.
yeah,
Yeah, same point. And they are taking over his life, right? As we see. I mean, people notice this, public notices this, and the quality of his work notices this. And so he might think that he's trading the, as they say, the wog world, the material world for the spiritual. Um, you know, a year from now, San Francisco is going to be in the same place it is now, doing the same nothing business. And he's going to seriously be wondering about his life choices, if not sooner. It's how it tends to go. All right. Aron, call me. Let's talk, man. All right. Let's go on to this L. Ron Hubbard birthday event. You had some great reporting on this.
yeah. Thank goodness. Alex Barnes Ross talked to somebody who saw the video that was shown in the orgs this weekend, and so we got a breakdown of what's in it. Go over to tonyortega.substack.com. I don't can't spin it all off the top of my head. It's a very good breakdown of what was presented. The two things that really stick with me are that Aron Kyro won the birthday game and gave a speech. I don't know. To me, that's a big deal.
Yep.
And second of all, Miscavige did say that Port Elizabeth, South Africa will be the next ideal org, and it's going to open next month.
Okay.
So I had posted a photo of it, I don't know, about a month ago, and you can see that it's done. The signage and everything, it's ready to go. And that was last August. So it's been ready to go.
Right.
So that will be the next ideal org opening. I guess David Miscavige will be in South Africa. I guess he has the last time he was there was for the AO, the Advanced Org. That was several years ago.
Oh yeah, that was a long time ago.
I want to say that was January 2020, or was it earlier than that? I know it was January. But anyway, so he's headed to South Africa apparently next month, folks. Down there, keep an eye out for him.
Okay.
And yeah, so those are the two big. I think those are the two big pieces of news. That this birthday game thing, and then the ideal. And the other big thing was, just a few days after that Clearwater Council vote, now Dave presented L. Ron Hubbard Hall to everybody, and said, "Here it is. Here's the drawings. Here's what it's going to be." And apparently talked in a lot of detail about the incredible technology that's going to go into it and everything. So Dave is making it sound like this thing's coming real quick, and we'll see.
Yeah, that's how they get the all the fundraising money for it, right? He does the briefing from stage, and then I guarantee you the after event thing for all the staff was donos for the hall. One thing I'll also say from those notes, they were extensive and very detailed. It was great. Was Miscavige's emphasis, as you've mentioned, on that whole golden age of administration thing. And he specifically mentions, or it was mentioned in there about the new organizing board and issues and all of that. I personally am very curious about the changes that Miscavige made literature wise, right? Like to the actual policies and the books of Scientology and the organizing board of Scientology. I'm very, very curious because There's a lot of stuff in the history of Scientology for Miscavige to draw from. He doesn't have to get super creative in coming up with new stuff. He just has to find old stuff that just kind of withered on the vine and resuscitate it.
I
And
see. Yeah.
I'm just curious what he's resuscitating or what he's coming up with now. Because it's interesting to me. So if any of y'all have any direct information on that, feel free to contact me and let me know. I'm sure eventually it will leak, but all the stuff that's out on the internet right now is older stuff at this point. We don't know what the fresh new stuff is, and
Okay.
I'm always curious about that. So
Okay.
all right. Anyway, Tony, thank you for that breakdown and for all that information on this stuff. What are you thinking on future stuff for this?
Well, we're still waiting for the slideshow and the press release. I thought it might come out on Sunday and it hasn't. But you know, it's always fun to see pictures of the event itself and see what Dave looks like, and you know, see if we can spot some celebrities in the crowd. So that's coming. I assume it's going to be at some point this week, and some other court stuff coming up this week. So it's going to be an interesting week, I think.
Awesome. All right, folks. Well, you heard it here. So you see the address for Tony's Substack there under his face there. Go ahead and go to it, sign up, get your daily notifications, and then come here on Mondays and we'll give you the wrap up. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.